In California, fearless frontiersmen are led against oppressors by a danger-loving soldier of fortune. Starring Jock Mahoney as Don Mike and Faith Domergue as Carlotta.
You trusted me to come here tonight. Can you trust me just a little more?
Why do you want to help me?
From ranchero to ranchero, he rode, rallying his people to fight for liberty.
The people always fight for what they think is right.
And I think they're wrong.
Against a ravaging invading army, the Californians became the freedom fighters, the underground heroes of frontier days.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I'm gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
This episode, we're talking about California from 1963.
California from 1963 is kind of a historical drama.
Also kind of a Western as well. California was produced and directed by Hamil Petroff, and the screenplay was by James West from his own story.
California stars Jock Mahoney as Don Michael O'Casey, Faith Domergue as Carlotta Torres, Michael Pate as Don Francisco Hernandez, Susan Seaforth as Marianna de la Rosa, Rodolfo Hoyos Jr. as Padre Soleil, Penny Santon as Dona Sofia Hicenta, Jimmy Murphy as Jacinto, Nestor Paiva as General Micheltorena, Roberto Contreres as Lieutenant Sanchez, Felix Locher as Don Pablo Hernandez, and Charles Horvath as Manuel.
Yeah, we're doing the best we can with their pronunciations here. Some of these people aren't that familiar, and their characters are even less so. So the movie opens up with a rather lengthy history lesson done by narration over the top of some footage of action. The lesson itself is kind of, what's the word? Boring, because it goes on for so long. The gist of it is that back in August of 1842, in the land of California, near Monterey, the Mexican army was sent to push down a rebellion. Whoever lived in California at the time wanted independence from Mexico. And Mexico, obviously, as countries often do, don't like independence or rebellions. So they sent soldiers to quash that.
So once we get through this prologue, we see a man falling off his horse on his way somewhere. This man is Don Pablo Hernandez, who is one of the leaders in the rebellion against Mexico.
He's one of the leaders of the town of Monterey, I guess. It's never really said, but whatever town we're in, he is equivalent to the mayor, I would say. He falls off the horse in front of the mission and is immediately spotted by Padre Soleil, who comes out of the inside of the mission to see what's going on.
As Don Pablo passes away, his son, Don Francisco Hernandez, comes up and kind of explains what happened.
Well, he's there to gloat, apparently. He's very happy to see that his father is dead. He tells the Padre to dispose of the body and sort of makes a veiled reference to how he died, which was not by natural causes.
Now, the death of Don Pablo is going to be devastating to the people as the leader of their cause.
Right. And this is Mexico City's opportunity to take advantage of that. They're sending troops up to try to take over. Don Francisco does kind of hint that the reason that his father died was because of something he ate, which I took to mean he had been poisoned.
Which will later be confirmed.
Right. Spoiler alert. He also mentions that the troops that are coming up are going to help him get appointed as the governor of California. So he's one of Ronald Reagan's predecessors, maybe. And Schwarzenegger's. So somewhere far away, a man is reading a newspaper. This is Don Michael O'Casey, and he finds out about the death of Don Pablo here. And we get a little narration over the top of this that says, him reading this story will change the course of history. He makes an immediate beeline back to, let's just call it Monterey, because this is his homeland.
So he rides his horse throughout the opening credits, after which he finds a sign that says El Camino Real, 3 miles. So I am assuming he goes there.
So maybe it's not Monterey. I don't know. They never say.
He stops at a cantina to ask for directions, and there he meets Carlotta Torres, who is the cantina's
owner and only employee, I would say.
Sure. She's reluctant to give directions to a stranger, so there's a little back and forth.
She gives nothing away for free, she says.
But she relents when he says he's come to town to visit his mother's grave.
Yeah, even she has a heart, I guess. She does want to know who he is, though. And this is where we find out.
Michael Antonio Maria Eduardo O'Casey.
And also, his mother's last name was Hernandez, which means he's related to Don Francisco. She wants to know if he's staying, and he says no, he'll be gone as soon as he makes this one visit. And she thinks that's pretty good because Micheltorena's army is on the way.
Yeah, and anyone with the last name Hernandez is suspect.
I don't know why that is, though, because Don Francisco, he's a Hernandez, and he's in charge of everything. But I guess all the other Hernandezes are not welcome.
Don Francisco has made it clear which side he's on.
And just as another spoiler, it's not the side of right. O'Casey makes a little jab at the Mexican army, but he's overheard by a couple of Mexican soldiers who take exception to this remark.
O'Casey had just come from Los Angeles, and he had seen what the soldiers did there, so he definitely wants to clear out of town before they get to wherever he is right now.
Right. And we don't know what happened in Los Angeles at this point, but apparently it's pretty bad.
So these Mexican soldiers stop to question him a little bit.
And it just immediately turns into a bar brawl. Tables are thrown, punches are thrown. The place is trashed.
O'Casey holds his own and takes care of the soldiers. Carlotta gives him a drink for the road, and he leaves the cantina.
She wishes him good luck on his journey, but one of the soldiers comes to and says that Micheltorena is going to hear about this.
So O'Casey, or Don Michael,
we're going to call him by one of those names,
is on his way to the mission where his mother is supposed to be buried. And when he's there, he comes across Marianna de la Rosa and her chaperone, Ana Sofia Hicenta.
That's her aunt as well.
Who is going to be hereforth known as Aunt Sofia.
Everyone has multiple names in the movie, and we're going to try and keep them all straight. We might call them one thing or another, depending on what our notes say.
In their conversation, O'Casey again says something derogatory about the Mexican government, and the women warn him against speaking ill of the Mexican government.
Yeah, that's treason.
They part ways, which is interesting because they're going to the same place.
Well, they don't know that yet, I don't think.
They don't, but the women get to the mission first.
Well, they're in a carriage, and he's on horseback. I don't know if one is faster than the other. The reason they met is because he stopped a Mexican soldier from harassing them and kind of rescued them. They were damsels in distress at that point. So he's obviously our hero here.
So the women reach the mission first, and they're speaking to the Padre, and Marianna says that she is preparing to fulfill her father's dying wish to marry someone. And the Padre doesn't feel she should go through with it because everybody else in this movie thinks that marriage for love is preferable to marriage for property.
That is not a real widespread attitude in the 1840s, I'm pretty sure. Aunt Sofia is also against this marriage. And you'd think that she's older and wiser and she'd be the one encouraging her to fulfill her marital duties. But no, she says she should marry for love.
And the two of them go inside the mission, just as O'Casey rides up. And the Padre recognizes him, though they've never met.
He looks like his mother, the mother who's buried in his yard somewhere, in an unmarked grave.
O'Casey asks where the grave is, and the Padre says it's unmarked, but tells him where to find it and to go quickly and not tell anyone who he is, because apparently being Hernandez is dangerous, but with the Mexican government in charge and all.
We get a little of his mother's backstory here. She eloped with an Irishman. She ran off and was never forgiven by her father, who was Don Francisco's father, so it's his sister. He once again meets Marianna here, and he tries to chat her up, but he gets sort of blocked by Aunt Sofia.
Now we cut to Don Francisco's villa.
That's a good word.
Where Francisco is fencing with Manuel, probably.
Probably. There's not a lot of people in this movie, so he's the best candidate here.
And Carlotta is in the room, and they seem to be some sort of an item.
On the down low, though, because he's marrying Marianna. So obviously she's the side chick.
Yeah, Francisco is the one that they were speaking of earlier that Marianna was marrying as her father's final wish.
She was her father's only child, and she's a girl, so she can't run things, so she needs to marry someone who will help her keep her father's land. Francisco announces that the soldiers that are coming are going to be billeted at his place, so we're going to see more of General Micheltorena pretty soon.
And though she says she wouldn't tell anyone, Carlotta tells Francisco about the man that came into her cantina earlier that day.
Yeah, she doesn't remember his name. He's just some Irish guy. Oh, something. O'Hare, O'Malley.
Francisco suggests maybe O'Casey, and she confirms, yeah, that's it.
She's not good at keeping secrets. This is the first secret that she blurts out, and it won't be the last.
So Francisco and Manuel get their horses and head off to the mission to find O'Casey.
Yeah, she didn't only say he was there, she told him where he was going to be. Loose lips sink ships, baby.
So when they arrive, they see that there is a headstone being placed on the formerly unmarked grave of O'Casey's mother.
And Don Francisco is not happy about that. It was kept headstone-less by design. So Manuel goes full Indiana Jones and starts whipping O'Casey.
After getting a couple of whips in, Francisco gets Manuel to stop so they can actually have a conversation. And this conversation is basically to challenge O'Casey to a duel.
O'Casey tries to call Francisco uncle, but Francisco's not having it. He said that his father disowned O'Casey's mom when she ran off, and so they aren't related.
I wonder how true that is, because Don Pablo was one of the respected ones, and was she really that much of a black sheep that...
Compared to his son, too, who's
yeah, that's
a real
what I'm
jerk.
saying.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes people get set in their ways, and it might have been a religious thing. I don't know. The Padre asks O'Casey how his sword fighting skills are, because apparently Francisco is the best in the land. And O'Casey thinks that he stands a fair chance.
And the Padre reminds O'Casey that he is a Hernandez, and that his mother was as well, despite what Francisco might say.
Yeah, and it's time to step up against the oppression that's happening. You know, the army's coming, the people are upset, and they need a leader in their rebellion.
So in the rebellion, we get a small montage of fighting and exploding wagons.
So I guess a little time passes here, and we see them doing some skirmishes where they blow stuff up and set things on fire. I don't know that they're really doing much more than being an annoyance at this point.
And they're leaving their mark because Viva Hernandez is written on walls
where the Mexican soldiers can see it. So they know who they're up against. And the Hernandez here is Don Michael O'Casey. So now he has a third name that we might throw in every once in a while. So the town's under martial law. No one is allowed out after dark.
And General Micheltorena is staying with Francisco as well as his army. They're
billeted there, yeah.
So they're having drinks this evening, and Marianna and Aunt Sofia are there as well.
He's drinking some of Marianna's family wine, and he's belching it up and complaining about it being too sweet. And that is not endearing him to Marianna and Aunt Sofia. Francisco tells the general that he's planning on throwing him a fiesta, and the general demands that he have dancing girls there like they have in Mexico City. That's very important to him. One of the soldiers, the one from the cantina who said he was going to tell Micheltorena what happened, is there to tell Micheltorena what happened. But this time he's referring to the resistance that's happening in town, that someone is blowing up their stuff, their outposts, and also scrawling Viva Hernandez on the walls. Marianna asks Francisco, well, your name's Hernandez. Who's this other Hernandez? And Francisco plays dumb. He does know, but he's saying he doesn't. He asks Marianna to go for a walk, though.
But Marianna says she has a headache, so they don't go for a walk. But she's got other things on her mind. Marianna tells Francisco that she doesn't love him, that she never will love him, and that he needs to stop making eyes at the girl in the cantina.
She expects Francisco to end his affair with Carlotta. She knows all about it, and she is not happy. Which is kind of a weird thing because she doesn't love him, and she's probably not going to be an enthusiastic wife, if you know what I mean. But also, no one else should take her place.
So later on, Aunt Sofia and Marianna are in Marianna's bedroom, and Sofia begs her not to go through with a loveless marriage.
Isn't it better to marry for love, says the woman who's never had anyone love her? That's kind of sad, but she's right. Francisco is a toad, and no one should marry him.
So as Aunt Sofia leaves, O'Casey enters the room, And Marianna threatens to call the servants because he basically just broke into her bedroom.
That's pretty scary. I don't care who you are, even today. Nobody likes people who just leap in through the window. O'Casey tries to hand her a note saying this will explain everything. I don't know what it is. She takes the note but doesn't read it.
Sofia hears voices and she tries to get back in, but the door's locked. Marianna locks the door to let her in, and by the time she gets in, O'Casey's hiding. But he's not hiding for long because he comes out and she sees the man in Marianna's room and tries immediately to kill him.
Yeah, she tries to brain him with a candlestick. Marianna says, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, without saying why it's okay. And eventually, everyone sits down on the bed.
He reveals his name is Hernandez, and she immediately regrets her decision to try to kill him.
Because O'Casey's mother was her best friend back in the day. She kind of faints at this knowledge that she almost killed her best friend's child.
So they finally convince Marianna to read the note, and he didn't come to her specifically. He's been going from villa to villa trying to unite people against Micheltorena's army.
And he's trying to get Marianna on his side as well to work against Don Francisco and the tyranny of the Mexican government.
And everyone in the town is willing to do this, except for Marianna. And she's annoyed that O'Casey and the Padre are meddling in what she sees are her personal affairs because she's going to be marrying Francisco.
And she also thinks it's a lost cause, that they'll never win, so why bother? More people are just going to get hurt when they try to rebel. Aunt Sofia leaves, and now Marianna and O'Casey are alone. Marianna wants O'Casey to leave. He's compromising her by being there. She's also really upset because of everyone pecking at her and trying to get her to change her mind about Francisco. So she's crying, and O'Casey does leave. And Aunt Sofia comes back to comfort her.
And so the battles continue. There's a sequence now where O'Casey, in a Mexican soldier's uniform, rides up to some sleeping drunken soldiers.
They're in their long johns, and they're just sleeping on the ground.
He comes up with Jacinto, and I guess
he salutes them, they salute back.
And while this is going on, Jacinto is stealing their horses.
Well, not just Jacinto, it's everyone who's on the side of Hernandez. But yeah, they steal a bunch of horses and drive them through the pass.
In the next sequence, Jacinto's in a wagon and Micheltorena is on a horse, and he stops Jacinto to ask him what he's heard, because being a small Indian boy, people don't pay attention to you, so you learn things.
Yeah, so he probably knows more than he will let on. They want to know who this Hernandez is. No one has ID'd who the actual leader of the rebellion is, and they're very interested to find out. Jacinto plays dumb, though, and does not tell them anything.
He says he only knows what the Padre tells him.
So it's kind of throwing the Padre under the bus here, isn't he?
Well, Micheltorena asks what the Padre has told him, and Jacinto says nothing. So Micheltorena is very frustrated. He rides off angrily.
And Jacinto says, "Viva Hernandez," as he leaves. But not in earshot, I'm sure.
Now we're in Francisco's library, and he is hiding something in a safe in the wall.
It's just like a secret panel in the wall. Carlotta's there with her back to what's going on, so she can't see where exactly this hidden thing is.
Francisco tells Carlotta that the general would like to meet her and have her dance for him. He has money he's willing to give her to make this happen.
She's pretty offended by this because he's never given her money before. So it implies that there's more in the ask than just a little bit of dancing. She says she's not a woman of the street and she's not going to compromise herself for anyone. She also says that she did love Don Francisco, but not anymore. What he has done has killed the love that she had for him.
So she throws the money to the ground and storms out of the room.
And Don Francisco says he doesn't care about her love. He really is a jerk. So now we're in the mission in the cemetery where O'Casey's mom finally has her headstone. He's there to pay his respects. He's got some flowers. And then Marianna and Ana Sofia come in, and they're going to a neighboring grave. I don't know whose this is, with flowers of their own. And when Ana Sofia sees that there's now an official burial place for, I don't know her name.
We don't know her name, it's just Hernandez.
So for O'Casey's mom, she takes half the flowers that she was going to put down on the other grave and walks over to O'Casey's mom's grave and gives him half the flowers for her friend.
Next, we see a poster written in Spanish, which thankfully for me
and me
turns into English so we could read it. And we learned that there was a price on the head of Don Mike Hernandez. So they've now identified this Hernandez And the prize is 500 pesos.
But they call him Mike. So do they really know he's Michael Eduardo Maria O'Casey? We don't know.
They have a name. They don't have a face.
Which Francisco knows who it is. So why is he not confessing that he knows? I don't know.
He's still family, I guess. I don't have an answer.
Well, it might be because of the secret that he has. He doesn't want that to get out. We'll get there in a bit.
Carlotta corners Jacinto and asks where she can find Don Mike Hernandez.
Yeah, apparently it's not a very well-kept secret that Jacinto is the way to Hernandez.
He insists that he still doesn't know who she's talking about, and she gives him a message to tell O'Casey to meet her tonight. And again, he says he doesn't know, but she doesn't care because she knows that he knows.
So now we're back in the cantina. O'Casey has to go through a few hurdles to get there, but he does. And he gets a chance to talk to Carlotta one-on-one.
He comes in again dressed as a Mexican soldier.
Yeah, that's how he sneaks through all the other guards that are on post.
And Carlotta says that she wants to help him. And she gives a playback of what's happened so far.
She says we know that he doesn't know.
She says that Francisco murdered his father. Don Pablo's will is hidden in Francisco's library.
Yeah, in that secret panel.
And that Don Pablo had written Francisco out of the will.
Yeah, we don't know who he wrote in, but it's definitely not Don Francisco. So he's kind of squatting on that property that he has no rights to.
And she knows where this is. She knows the room. She doesn't know where the panel is.
But she knows enough to at least start the investigation.
So if they agree to trust each other, maybe they can work this out. Now back at Villa Francisco, Micheltorena, Francisco, Marianna, and Aunt Sofia are watching the dancers.
And Carlotta is one of the dancers, along with two men who don't have names.
So Carlotta finishes her dance. The men are to continue. And Carlotta sneaks O'Casey into the library, and they start looking for this will. It doesn't take long for the general to become bored watching the male dancers.
He's also upset that no one else showed up to this fiesta, which was supposed to be a big party with all the townspeople, but, they hate him. Or they hate Francisco. He doesn't know which, but he knows that they hate somebody.
And he'd rather watch the pretty girl dance again. So Francisco goes off to find out where Carlotta went off to.
He goes to the library where Carlotta and O'Casey are poking around trying to find that will. So Francisco goes in search of Carlotta. We see inside the library that the search is paid off. O'Casey has found the secret panel, found the box, opened it up, and found the paper within. That's the will. He pockets it just as Francisco knocks on the door, which was locked.
So as O'Casey hides, Carlotta lets Francisco in, and he asks what she's doing in there. She says she had a headache.
He wants her to dance again, and she, again, refuses.
So he reminds her that pretty soon he's going to be pretty well off, and if she sticks with him, she'll be pretty well off too.
He lies and says that he loves her, and she she knows that it's not true. And here she blurts out again that he's not going to be in a position of power anytime soon because she's betrayed him. Surprise.
And he seems to know exactly how because he checks and finds that the will is gone.
And he pulls a knife on her and threatens her. He knows that she took it.
This gets O'Casey to come out of hiding. He has a sword.
This scene's really funny. Francisco grabs Carlotta and puts a knife to her throat and tells O'Casey to drop the sword.
Or he will kill her. And O'Casey does drop the sword.
Francisco throws Carlotta down on the ground, and she's kind of behind him. And while Francisco has O'Casey at a disadvantage, she just gives him a hard poke in the back of the knee and sends him sprawling to the floor.
He turns around, looks at her, and says, "You fixin'!"
I mean, if that's all it takes, dude, that's on you. You should have a firmer stance.
So she grabs a gun from the top of the desk as O'Casey picks up his sword again, and now they have the advantage.
O'Casey feels like he can leave now because Carlotta has a gun and she's not in any danger.
So Carlotta sends him off to inspire the people.
"You're still Don Mike, and the people still look to you," she says as he leaves. After O'Casey leaves, right outside the villa, he gets jumped by some soldiers. There's a scuffle, but he does get away.
Though Carlotta is now in the position of power, she puts the gun down and negotiates for her life with Francisco.
Stupid.
And he says he will let her live if she goes to Micheltorena and does the dance and anything else that Micheltorena may want.
Yeah, you can fill in the blanks here.
And she says she will do that if she can speak to Marianna alone. He doesn't like that idea, does eventually relent.
I think he wants to make the general happy more than anything.
So Marianna is sent to the library. And she and Carlotta have a brief conversation.
Carlotta basically joins the chorus of people telling her to marry for love and not for whatever reason she's marrying Francisco. Again, it's just a business deal. She introduces the idea that O'Casey is in love with Marianna. I was taken by surprise by this revelation. Were you?
Yeah, but apparently Carlotta could see it in his eyes.
And in hers, I guess. So she basically invents this romance between the two of them and says that she should follow her heart and go for O'Casey. Leave Don Francisco.
And Marianna knows that Carlotta's the other woman in her triangle. And Carlotta does say she loves Francisco, but she could never be with him because he's evil.
That's true.
So Marianna takes her leave, and Carlotta starts looking at that knife that was earlier held to her throat.
And she seems like she's not going to use it on Francisco, unfortunately. The general comes to the door, knocks on it. He wants his bit of fun.
And she says, just one moment, she's not quite ready.
And then we hear this weird strangled cry from behind the door. The general opens the door, takes a look in, raises his eyebrows, and thinks better of going in and doing anything about whatever just happened inside there. He closes the door and he's gone.
Don Michael Casey is riding along and he is jumped by another Mexican soldier. So this is apparently something he has to deal with for the rest of this rebellion.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But again, O'Casey holds his own. And there's another soldier who sees this.
It's the same soldier that was in the cantina and then narked on him to Don Francisco. This is Roberto Contreres as Lieutenant Sanchez. And unfortunately, his character is a real cowardly, not very, kind of a stereotype. I don't know. It's not comfortable to watch.
Anyway, he sees this and he runs off.
O'Casey chases him for a bit, but lets him go. Ultimately, he can't catch up to him.
And later on, we see Aunt Sofia and Marianna riding in a carriage.
Driven by Jacinto, the Indian boy. Jacinto is driving the carriage because he's the one that knows where the secret hideaway is, and they don't. The secret hideaway is a cave at the top of a hill. So they're at the bottom of the hill, and everyone's got to hoof it up to this cave.
Sofia makes it as far as the cave entrance, but can't go any further because going into caves is not a thing she wants to do at her age. So she decides that Marianna can go in, but she has 10 minutes.
I think she's doing that for another reason, too. I think she wants to give them a little alone time. So I think the romance between the two is being facilitated. It was by Carlotta, and now it's by Aunt Sofia.
So O'Casey brings her in, and he leads her to his cave dining area.
/ war room. He's got maps and targets that he's looking over.
It looks like this cave was used for mining or something in the past because there are wood supports over the doorways and stuff. And unless O'Casey did this himself.
I don't think he's going to have time for that.
So Marianna says she wants to apologize for her behavior before. And she realizes that it's important to fight for one's beliefs.
Right. And she also tells O'Casey the sad news about Carlotta. She killed herself in the library just after the general left.
Yeah, she puts it very gingerly and asks if Carlotta was someone that he knew well. And he's like, was?
Yeah. O'Casey says that Carlotta was a good, loyal friend. I think Marianna is trying to quiz whether or not they had any kind of a romance going on, which they didn't.
And it's at this point that O'Casey and Marianna declare their love for one another.
Yeah, so everyone's on board with the romance here.
And she asks if there's any ways she can help with the rebellion. And he says, no, the best thing for her to do is just to go back and stay quiet and stay out of the way.
I guess the rebellion is pretty much over at this point. The Mexican soldiers are about to be recalled. It's the first that we've heard of it. The only thing on O'Casey's agenda at this point is to kill Don Francisco.
So as Sofia and Marianna leave, 2 Mexican soldiers, one of which is the cowardly Sanchez, happen upon the cave where Don Mike is hiding.
The soldiers find the carriage and then from there realize that that must be the hiding place.
So they go in. They're able to sneak up on O'Casey, who's looking at maps. But for some reason, they kind of announce their appearance.
Like cock their weapon or whatever.
Was that what it was?
Yeah,
okay.
However you do. They're getting set to shoot him, and the gun makes a noise, and O'Casey looks up and is able to leap out of the way just in time.
They get off a shot. He gets off a shot and kills one of them immediately, not Sanchez.
Sanchez is still in pursuit, but O'Casey knows the caves a little bit better, and there's a back way. He comes around and comes up behind him.
O'Casey gets the soldier's attention, and he gets off a shot, and then it's hard to tell what happens. It appears that the shot that Sanchez took ricocheted off the cave wall and came back at him.
But it also could be that O'Casey shot him. However, there's only smoke coming out of one rifle at this point, and it's Sanchez's. It's sort of a ridiculous death scene for this poor beleaguered character.
It's difficult to tell because not only is there no smoke, but it's hard to tell if there's one or two shots going off simultaneously.
But he's dead nonetheless.
And since the Mexican army is being recalled, Micheltorena is going back with them. He's going back to be court-martialed.
He's pretty cheerful about it, too. He seems like that's just the cost of doing business.
So he bids adios to Francisco, and off he goes back to Mexico.
He says he's sorry he couldn't make him governor. That was never going to happen anyways.
So Francisco goes back into his library, and he finds O'Casey standing there, sword in hand, waiting for him.
Now it's time for the duel that we've been promised this entire movie.
This is your day of reckoning, Don Francisco. So they duel.
It's rather clumsy. A lot of stuff gets knocked over. No one gets stabbed for way too long.
Eventually, O'Casey is the victor, I guess. Francisco begs for his life, and he says that everything he has is O'Casey's, because legally it is.
Right, that's what the will said.
Just let him live. And then he throws a flower pot at his head.
He's not a fair fighter.
He runs up to, I assume, Manuel to get help, but Manuel's not answering his door.
He takes off across the roof after that.
Yep, and jumps down onto a horse to try and get away. O'Casey jumps on the horse behind him, on the same horse.
They're scrapping, and then all of a sudden somebody, I guess Manuel, is standing on the roof with a rifle, and he takes a shot that hits Francisco. Intentionally? We don't know.
So it seems that Francisco has crawled off to the mission to die.
Just like his dad. You know, I just realized that. There's a nice wraparound there.
And O'Casey comes to the mission and sees Francisco lying there. He calls out to the Padre because they have to do something about the body on the lawn.
Yeah, dispose of that. And then we fade to black. And when we fade back up, it's sometime later.
Yeah, the Padre says there is much work to be done. The battle is over, but the war continues.
And apparently there's a wedding in the offing.
Yeah, Marianna intends to marry the one who has just taken over the Rancho Hernandez.
How convenient for her.
And convenient for O'Casey as well, because it gives the movie and him a happy ending.
It's always nice to have an ending. The newly unemployed Aunt Sofia and Jacinto look on approvingly as O'Casey and Marianna profess their love. The end. We're back with the American International Podcast. Today we're talking about California from 1963. When this movie was released, its tagline was, "Fearless frontiersman led by a danger-loving soldier of fortune," referring to O'Casey, but none of the women in this movie get any credit there. And in some areas, this movie was released on a double bill with Operation Bikini. Some of the actors, not many, would go on to do other projects for AIP. Jock Mahoney would appear in The Glory Stompers in 1967, and Faith Domergue would go on to appear in Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet in 1965.
And Jimmy Murphy, who played Jacinto, had previously appeared in Paratroop Command in 1959 and would appear in Angels from Hell in 1968.
This movie was part of a renaissance of old school Westerns that happened in 62 and 63. Other examples are The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and How the West Was Won. AIP decided to jump on this bandwagon, as they often did, with this film. The movie was shot on the old Republic Pictures lot. And that sword fight at the end was not in the script. It was a last-minute decision by director Hamil Petroff to add to the film.
I think that was a wise decision, because to end the film without having that final face-off would have been lacking.
Right. We didn't need an off-camera death like we did with Carlotta. An off-camera death like the one with Carlotta was necessary because she killed herself and it was really sad. We did need to see that final duel between O'Casey and Francisco because they had been talking about it for the whole movie.
And Jock Mahoney was also a stuntman, and he performed as such in 90 films, and he doubled for actors such as Errol Flynn, Gregory Peck, and Randolph Scott. And he had also worked with the Three Stooges.
He was Sally Field's stepfather, which is cool until you realize that Sally Field wrote in her autobiography that he molested her until she was 14 years old. Ugh. And Faith Domergue had an interesting life, too. When Faith was 17 or 18, back in 1942, she began a relationship with Howard Hughes. He was 37 at the time, and he had spotted her at one of his yacht parties. When she discovered that Hughes was a philanderer, seeing Ava Gardner, Rita Hayworth, and Lana Turner, she ended their relationship. However, they still had a business relationship. He had bought out her contract with Warner Brothers and signed her to a 3-picture deal with RKO. He cast her in the thriller Vendetta, which came out in 1950, but that film had a long and troubled history. There were lots of reshoots, and when it was finally released, it was a critical and financial failure. And she later described all those experiences in her 1972 book, My Life with Howard Hughes.
Faith Domergue is probably best remembered today for having appeared in This Island Earth.
Yeah, I saw her in that. I didn't even realize it's the Mystery Science Theater, the movie.
At the time that California was released, AIP had instituted a no TV for 5 years policy. So starting with The Raven and Operation Bikini, they pledged that those films and any to follow will not be shown on television sooner than 5 years from national release, subject only to bank foreclosures or financial loss. So they did have that caveat in there.
Yeah, you never know how business goes.
And what's interesting about California is I read that this was produced as a potential television series pilot.
Yeah, I can see how that could be. It had all the makings of a great Western series like Gunsmoke.
I think you can see that in the score, too. It's a little over the top. The music in this it's very orchestral. There's a lot of guitar, the Mexican-sounding guitar.
Spanish guitar, yeah.
Spanish guitar. And there's just a lot of really lush orchestration, and it's a very noticeable score.
Right, and the sets look very TV-friendly as well. Even though we're on the Republic backlot, a lot of this stuff is filmed inside these same sets, the cantina, the villa. There's not a lot of variety here. We never go inside the mission. We're always just outside in the courtyard.
How do you think a television series would have played out? Would it be during the time of the movie and just battles going on and all this drama, or would it be after and maybe the continuing battles?
Well, there were continuing battles. In 46 and 47, there was another battle for Monterey, so they could have said it then. And then Marianna and O'Casey would have been married, maybe had some kids, a cute little family, and then they could do all their battles against the evil Mexican government then.
And we'd be watching it on MeTV today instead of the Big Valley.
That's right. It could have gone somewhere. There's not a lot of information on this movie in IMDb, but someone was very careful to point out that the firearms used by the Army and some of the ranchers were not actually available in the 1840s. And what they were using were rifles from the 1870s, and not even revolvers were available till the 1850s. So there were some anachronisms with the weaponry used in the movie. I never would have known if it weren't for IMDb. So thanks, gun nerds.
So Cheryl, I know that you are not a fan of Westerns, so I'm really curious to hear what you thought of this film.
I had to watch this so many times. The first time I tried watching it, I absolutely lights out. Fell asleep 20 minutes in. And the second time, I managed to stay awake the whole time. But I couldn't really follow what was going on. It's very soap opera-ish. There's two men and two women, and they love each other. But there's also battles and stuff going on, so I guess that's cool. The third time, when I was taking notes, and then finally understanding everything that went on, I did start to like it a little bit more. However, the prologue at the beginning that we mentioned that tells all the history, it's very badly written. It's very didactic. It's just a lecture, basically. And even there, they don't tell a lot of why there's a battle, why the Mexican government is doing what they're doing. A lot of the stuff we had to look up on Wikipedia to try to figure out which battle this was. And I'm not even sure it's historically accurate, to be honest, because it didn't track with the timing of the Battle of Monterey, which, as we said, happened in 46 and 47. But we did have to sit through this, and I don't know how long it was, but it felt like it was 10 minutes of prologue. Just way too much. So while I think that there's a good little story in here, that maybe it would have been better on TV than as a movie. So going by our AIP scale, a awesome, I, intermediate, P, pathetic, I'll give it an I. It's at the halfway point. It's almost there. There's a lot of characters that are kind of, I don't know, stereotypically goofy and where they could have been actual characters and real people. They're just stereotypes. I didn't appreciate that. And I didn't like the misogyny of it. I didn't like the racism of it, which was weird because everyone in this movie is ostensibly Mexican, and yet there's still racism happening. But there is a good story here. I think with a little more work, they could have made a good movie out of this. So, like I said, it's an I. How about you, Jeff?
I would agree about the prologue. What frustrated me is the American educational system leaves a lot to be desired. So trying to research this, trying to figure out what exactly happened and when, and it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't tracking. That was frustrating because I was trying to figure out the timeline for the actual events, and I had difficulty figuring that out.
Right.
I'm still not 100% sure.
We don't know a lot about the history of California. We live next door, and we don't know.
For the movie itself, I really enjoyed it. I thought for a historical drama such as it is, it didn't have a lot of the cutesy things that they would throw in these movies a lot. There was the character of Jacinto, who is the Indian, who the actor Jimmy Murphy has blue eyes. So obviously that's why he was cast.
Well, it's a black and white movie, so we can forgive that.
But there's not a lot of the little comic relief bits that you would normally see in that. And I appreciated the lack of that.
But there is a little bit, though, with Lieutenant Sanchez, where he's running away from O'Casey like a coward. And he stands there, eyes wide open, watching all his fellow soldiers get manhandled by this one guy, and he does nothing. And then he runs away with his tail between his legs. So his character was a sore thumb, basically. But you're right. There were good characterizations by most everyone, but Lieutenant Sanchez did not get that treatment.
Yeah, so I'm going to give this one an I as well. It's not great. I think it would be looked back at rather fondly if a TV series did develop out of it. But that didn't happen, so it has to stand on its own. And I don't think it's strong enough to just stand on its own, so it's not worthy of an A.
No, but there were some good performances. Susan Seaforth would later go on to be one of the founding cast members of Days of Our Lives, the soap opera. She was the matriarch in that. So any fans of Days of Our Lives might enjoy seeing her in her earlier work. I thought her performance was outstanding as someone who's basically not afraid to admit she's in it for the money, but yet she relents and opts for love when there are no other options.
So in summary, this is an average movie and worth checking out if you're in the mood for some 60s era 1840s melodrama.
/ Western. All right, I think that wraps up this episode. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And until next time, we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.